Let's go to Ric Serritella now. He's going to join us on the show. All right, Ric Serritella, one of the best in the business, founder of the NFL Draft Bible, one of the best draft guys in the world. He joins us now here on the show. Ric, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Thursday edition post NFL Draft, brother? It comes and it goes, right?
Yeah, man. Well, it comes and it goes right into the next stage of the NFL calendar. Rookie mini camps. We just don't stop. It's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. The NFL does a great job. I always say it with the calendar, Rick. Maybe the best thing they do is set up the calendar where you just roll into something else. So the interest is always there for the NFL. They do a tremendous job with that. Obviously, good to see you, first of all, but I want to get into a lot of things with you, but I want to start with the Eagles because it's such an interesting pick at number 31 overall, Jihad Campbell. A lot, Howie came out after, started talking about him as an edge rusher. A lot of people think he's an off-ball linebacker. I've never seen so much disconnect, and I give my buddy BLG, Brandon Lee Gouton. I'm sure you know Bob McGinn, his rankings every year. He's been doing it for 40 years. Scouts. He's got a bunch of different scouts talking about Jihad Campbell. And this was pre-draft before the Eagles took him. I've never seen some guys rave about his instincts and some guys say he's got no instincts at all to play off-ball linebacker. Mm-hmm. Where are you in that conversation? I've never seen the disconnect from actual personnel people.
Yeah, well, so it's a great question because in terms of a pass rusher, he's got, it seems like, natural instincts.
Yes.
And he's got pure athleticism. Now, does he have the frame to be there on a consistent basis, down after down after down? That's to be debated. In terms of his off-ball linebacker skills, they're still raw. They're still developing. Like he does not always take the best angles. Okay. And sometimes you feel like he's trying to feel his way through the processing. And Bobby Wagner was kind of like that coming out of college too. It's something that he's just working on. And I think he's going to get it. But I would tend to be in the boat where as an off-ball linebacker, he's still developing, but I like him there best because I think his best football is still ahead of him. Like he made great strides when you watched him this past season. Like he got better week after week after week, and he's going to keep trending in that direction.
Where'd you have him on your big board, Rick? Did you think that was a big value? A lot of people talked about how good the value was there. Now there's some talk about the injury. I don't know what's going on with that. 2 knees, 2 shoulders. That's a little concerning, but how good of a value pick was that there for the Eagles at 31?
Well, I factored in the medical in my ranking, right, which was somewhere in that 20 to 30 overall range. In terms of pure talent, you could say he's a arguably top 10 talent. But yeah, you got to worry about, like, he's not going to be immediately available, right? Does he start on the mend? Does he start on the IR? Is he one of these guys who comes off after the bye week? I mean, I think it's a long-term play here, right? You got to make sure he gets healthy first and foremost. He just had that labrum surgery right after the combine, which was the end of February into March. So, I mean, you're talking about he's a month into, 2 months into his rehab, not even. However, like, it's another weapon on defense. You talk about Nolan Smith coming out of Georgia. There was the kind of same debate. Is he an off-ball linebacker? Is he a pass rusher? I think the Eagles now have some chess pieces to work with. But, short term, Nakobe Dean on the mend, Campbell on the mend. So linebacker depth, what does that look like in training camp?
Small Munden, baby.
I like Smile.
I like that as a day 3 pick. So here's one of the things.
Another injury prone guy, though, right?
Yeah. Well, he had some issues. But here's one thing, one from the begin stuff as well. So this is one that concerned me about Campbell, but I thought was interesting about Smile. And this is from the scout. I have 6 or 7 off-ball linebackers in the top 100. Only one that isn't capable of being your green dot is Campbell. That concerned me. Munden and he brought up Munden and all the others are. Smile Munden. Injuries, I think the kid's really talented. I mean, I get why he dropped, but if you're talking off-ball linebacker and you got to wait a couple weeks for Nakobe Dean coming back from his patellar tendon. Can Smile Munden, as a rookie, beat out somebody like Jeremiah Trotter?
Yeah, I think he can, because he has the pedigree, the experience. Obviously that Georgia, going back to that Georgia wishing well, he has the talent. It's about staying out of the tub. You can't make the club in the tub, and staying healthy and staying on the field. But when you watch him, this is a guy, talk about true nose for the football, constantly shows up around the ball, flies to the football, can drop back in pass coverage and do that too. So he's all over the field. I mean, I like what he brings to the table. And yeah, I think he's going to compete immediately for a role, whether that's starting or a rotational back. I think Smile London's going to factor into the equation as a rookie. Absolutely.
Interesting day 3 pick there. Rick, I got to ask you about Makuba. All right. I'm all over the board on this guy, because I'll turn on the tape and I'm like, this dude's everywhere. But he is a small player, and the way I like what John says. He's like, he doesn't play like he's a small player. That right, he hits people. He's aggressive. What do you see in that player? You think he's a day one starter type of guy? And what kind of ceiling do you see on a guy like Andrew Makuba, the Eagles' second round draft pick?
Well, I'm going to give Howie Roseman the benefit of the doubt here, because I think I had him as my 5th overall safety, which is still, right in that range, 64th overall. I was a little bit lower. I liked some guys that were on the board better. But when you talk about what they lost in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and what Mukumba brings to the table, very similar player, right? Hair on fire type, creates turnovers, had 5 interceptions this past season, can bait the quarterback. So I like what he brings to the table. Now, he is again, still best football still in front of him, comes over from Zimbabwe, discovers football in the 5th grade, becomes the first true freshman ever in the history of Clemson. And then he transfers from Clemson. They ask him at the combine, well, why did you transfer from Clemson to Texas? He said, I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. So here's a guy who just wants to get better, embraces coaching, has dominated every step of the way throughout the process, and discovered football later on in life. So I'm going to give Howie Roseman the benefit of the doubt. But when you compare him and Chauncey Gardner side by side, almost the same player.
Yeah, I see the same type of traits. I agree with you, Rick. I never liked that approach, though. I'm going for you. I lose CJ Gardner-Johnson, so I want the closest to CJ. You remember Troy Williamson?
Yeah.
I was like, when I was in Minnesota when things went sour with Randy Moss, and they end up trading him, one of the great receivers of all time, and they say, all right, what are we going to do? I think they had the 7th pick in the draft, and they wanted to replicate what Randy did. So they just picked a guy who could run by everybody, and he could run by everybody, and he was always open, and he dropped everything, Rick. He dropped everything. And that's different. That's a Hall of Fame player. But I just don't like we lost CJ, so we got to replace CJ with those traits. We lost Milton Williams. You as a from the scouting perspective, I'm like, I don't know who you like there. Xavier Woods, Kevin Winston Jr. Maybe go a different direction if you think that's a better player.
I agree with you for the most part. However, like Howie has a little bit of freeway. Like he's got a long leash to work with. And I felt like even that day 1 trade, I felt like almost he got a little bit too cute and fancy. Like he's almost like flexing his muscles on us now. Like, listen, there was an allure with that safety position. He had him in the house, then he let him go. Then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson played a key role in helping bring that Super Bowl back. So I think he was trying to replicate that. He got out of the best player available mode and tried to fill a need, because obviously he wasn't feeling exactly comfortable with what was on the roster. So, my safety big board differed from the rest of the league. I had Billy Bowman as my
Billy Bowman. Yeah,
he went in like the 4th or 5th round, I think. Yeah. So I mean, listen, he fits the DNA, but I'm with you in terms of philosophy. I think you get yourself hurt when you try to fill a need over the best player available.
Rick, they traded back in round 3, ultimately got back into early round 4, and they selected Ty Robinson, defensive tackle from Nebraska. This guy is interesting, man. Vanilla Gorilla, he's calling himself, which is, I think, hilarious on the nickname front. But what do you see that player as? Does he impress you? Where'd you have him on your board? And what do you think he can be for this Eagles defense?
Yeah, I had him right around where he went. I think you talk about a guy who's just big, agile, athletic, can be moved up and down the defensive line. I think he can bring some versatility as a rotational piece. He could step in just about for any one of those interior guys. And I wouldn't be surprised, if you see him moonlighting a little bit out on the edge because he has that type of athleticism. And so, rotational piece, versatility, athletic, size, good looking player. First one off the bus type.
Another interesting, and I want to ask you your day 3 favorite player, but before I get to that, for the Eagles, but before I get to that, I want to talk about Antoine Powell-Ryland, and maybe he is, but I want to talk to you from a scouting perspective. A lot of Eagles fans are fired up about this guy. He had tremendous production at Virginia Tech, and that's why big numbers. So how do you weigh that? Like, how does a guy who's got that big in numbers, that much production at the college, at Power 5, not Alabama, but big time college football, and everybody's got him 6th, 7th round grade or somewhere in that range for the most part. Like, where's the disconnect? How do you parse through that and say, all right, this guy's really productive on the field, but he probably doesn't project that highly in the NFL?
Yeah, listen, he was productive the last 2 seasons, but he couldn't see the field at Florida, right? So I think it starts there. You go back and you wonder, well, why did this guy spend 3 years in Florida and could barely see the field? He goes to Virginia Tech and blows it up. So I think that's where you got to start with. Also, I'm looking at my measurements, 31 and 2/8 inch arms, right? Very few guys in the NFL survive. I mean, I'd be curious how many guys are actually in the NFL playing pass rusher with 31-inch arms. Probably very few. And then 6'2.5", you talk about the length. So this is not your traditional kind of edge rusher. Now, 40-inch vertical, 4.69 40, 21 miles per hour on the GPS. You talk about speed to power. I mean, that's something you've got to now try to coach out of him and maybe put him in situations where he just comes in solely as a pass rushing presence, probably as a stand-up guy, and you use him situationally. But this is not an every down player. Maybe he can contribute on special teams. I don't have that here in my notes that he did that, but high motor, so I just think you got to figure out, like, can he play a little off-ball linebacker? Where do you fit this guy? He doesn't check off the boxes when it comes to measurables.
Rick, let me ask you about all the day 3 picks. I want you to give me one of them, all right, that's going to have the best chance to be a starter in this league. Maybe not this year, but at some point down the line. You got Ty Robinson, 4th-round pick. McWilliams, one of their first 5th-round pick. Smile Munden, we talked about. Drew Kendall, the center from Boston College. Kyle McCord, quarterback from Syracuse. Miles Hinton, son of Chris Hinton from Michigan. Tackle Cameron Williams out of Texas. And then obviously John just mentioned Antoine Powell-Ryland. Where's the most upside with those guys, man? Where do you see it?
Well, we just talked about the safety and how they went to go fill a need. I felt like Drew Kendall, they stayed true to the best player available at 168 overall. I had this guy as my number 1 rated center. I mean, I love
him. I love him, Rick. What's not to love?
I don't understand how he I mean, this mystified me how he lasted this long. I had a chance to talk to his dad, Pete Kendall, who was a first-round pick from the Seahawks in 1996, I believe. And he was also his coach for the most part growing up. So when you talk about just a fundamentally sound technician, lateral mirror ability, bend, leadership. Like, I went down to the East-West Shrine Bowl, and all the players just gravitated towards Drew Kendall. He had a natural leadership presence about him that really impressed me. I was blown away. And now I get it. Look, Cam Jurgens looks great at center, but he did start at 1 year at guard. And I'm not saying Drew Kendall's going to come in here and take Cam Jurgens' job, but it allows them the flexibility to at least attempt to get the 5 best players on the field. And I think Drew Kendall is a starter in the National Football League. What a great value pick. One of my favorite.
I real quick, I thought it was interesting. Howie, after the draft, after he drafted him, called it a center deficient league. And he said too many teams, go to off-season work and they say, well, we'll turn this guard into a center and move him inside. Yeah. And he said snapping is very unnatural. Not a lot of guys can do it. And this guy's a legitimate traditional center. I think he played every snap he played at Boston College at center. And he knows he's got to get more versatile, probably play a little bit of guard because as a backup, you have to be that. But
sure,
I thought it was interesting that he said it's a center deficient league and not a lot of guys have that trait to snap the football. And I've seen it live, Rick. When Marcus Mariota was here as a backup, the Eagles didn't have a backup center. The poor guy was playing shortstop in practice before he could even get into the play. And then they had to bring in Josh Andrews to be the backup center just to snap the football properly to get, good reps on the second team in training camp.
I think it's a valid point, and I think it's one of the more underrated aspects. If you look around the league, we always say, hey, what defines quality teams? Well, they all have a good quarterback, most likely a starting quarterback. But if you look at the playoff teams and the teams that do well in the National Football League, also another common denominator is they usually have a pretty high caliber quality center. And, because of all the things you just mentioned, but also the center is supposed to be the smartest player really outside of the quarterback on the team. Yeah. A lot of these guys make pre-snap reads. They have to be able to communicate to the rest of the line. Okay. And you have to have great awareness and smarts. And so I do think that a lot of times teams put off look at the centers. I think Jared Wilson, was the first one off the board at 97th or 95th overall. You're getting a starting caliber player at this position because teams don't value it. And then they go to camp and they say, well, hey, we'll just take a tackle deficient or a guard deficient. This guy lacks length. Let's kick him over to center. We'll put him there. And the USC kid he was at left tackle blocking for Caleb Williams. They kicked him over to center, right? You mentioned Kendall, a true center. Like, there is no transition. He's been doing it. He could do it blindfolded. His father probably had him snapping the ball before he could walk. So, I loved Drew Kendall.
How do you see the class stacking up, Rick, compared to the other NFC East teams? I thought the Giants had a pretty good draft. I thought the Cowboys had a pretty good draft. Really, all of them had a pretty good draft. How do you see them stacking up versus what the other teams in the NFC East did?
I thought the Commanders really did well in the offseason as a whole, but to get Laramie Tunsil and then double down with Josh Connerly and provide bookend protectors for Jaden Daniels, I thought was huge. And then, remember by the way, snuck Deebo Samuel in that offense now. So I think Washington, man, I think they are the team to beat in terms of
Trey Amos. I love that pick.
Yeah, love Trey Amos. I think the Commanders now, you saw, they hung with the Eagles for the first half in that playoff game, and then the experience just, was too much for them to overcome. I think the Commanders are the real deal. I think
You're telling me they're the team to beat, Rick? Did I hear that right?
In terms of the Eagles competition, who they have to worry about?
Yeah.
I don't think it's the 49ers like everybody thinks it is. I don't think the Cowboys are doing much of anything. The Giants had a plan and executed it, but I don't know. Jackson Dart gives them optimism, but they're not doing anything in the short term.
Yeah,
Yet.
I don't love. I love Carter and I love Alexander. I thought it was good,
Yeah,
bad,
Cam
good, bad.
Scattaboo, good pick.
Yeah.
Marcus Mabo, their 5th-round pick, was probably my favorite of the bunch, just
Yeah.
because I watched him irritate and irk every defensive lineman he went up against in Mobile. But yeah, when you look around the NFC, like Detroit is going to be a contender. I think Tampa Bay improved
Yeah, I do
themselves.
too. How about the Rams? I think the Rams are going to be good this year.
The Rams are going to always, as long as Sean McVay is there, the Rams
Yeah.
are always going
And
to
Les
be.
Snead, man. Les Snead is money in
Yeah.
the draft and as a GM.
Yeah, in hindsight, I got to tell you, I didn't think much of the Rams coming into when they played the Eagles, but they gave the Eagles by far their toughest test in the playoffs, and they dominated
Yeah.
Minnesota the week before. And even that, I'm saying, well, Sam Darnold, and I think a lot of people said the clock struck midnight on Sam Darnold. And I was talking to Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, who are two pretty good offensive linemen, after the talking about the Rams pass rush, and they said, man, that is the real deal, that pass rush. And I was like, all right, maybe, if those guys are saying it, I took it a little bit more seriously. Now they got to figure out a way to stop the run, though, the Rams. And they brought in Puna Ford, I think. They got Puna, right? Did they?
I think they did, because he's one of those
they got
undersized.
Puna.
Yeah.
3-year, $27 million or something. They got Puna. Yep.
Well, they had to replace Aaron Donald in steps, and they had a very good start with picking Jared Verse and Fisk, Brandon Fisk. It took 2 guys to kind of replace that production, but both guys came in like gangbusters. And you're right, like Snead and McVay, what a combination, continuity. Yeah, I mean, I think the Rams are going to be in there. Just going back to this Eagles draft, a couple guys I wanted to touch base on, like Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams. I think Eagles fans are going to want to know about these guys, right? Because they're offensive linemen. And like Hinton, I have mixed, thoughts on, because I love this film. On film, I gave him like a mid-round, 3rd-round grade. And then you find out, like, there's a stigma against Stanford guys, because that's where he started his career. He actually thought about quitting football, right? And I felt like he got knocked back. I know he got knocked down a few pegs on my board because of that. And when you start questioning a player's love for the game, a passion for the game, sometimes you go undrafted altogether. So he's going to be in the mix, I think. Cameron Williams, he looks the part, has all the tools. I was a little bit curious about this, because he's strictly a right tackle. I know the Eagles like to cross-train guys. I don't think he's quick or athletic enough to play left tackle. He's kind of too big to be a guard. But now he flashed on film. Like early in the season, people were talking about him as a 1st-round pick. I never saw that. Also, you have to be careful with the penalties. I think he had like 7 penalties this past year.
Yeah.
Right. So like the discipline with Cameron Williams, you have to be concerned about. And then Kyle McCord, like Howie Roseman is one of the maybe the only GM that subscribes to the Bill Walsh philosophy of drafting a quarterback every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so on board with this thought process, because quarterbacks become equity. You can never have enough good quarterbacks, right? And so I give Howie Roseman a tip of the cap for taking one every year, trying to develop a guy. Here's a local kid he's going to have all the time in the world to be patient with, and he can sling it around the parking lot now. Kyle McCord, he's a gunslinger, so that's going to be a fun project to work with.
And my only pushback on Cameron Williams is too big to play guard. Maybe other places. They turned Mekhi Becton into a guard here.
That's true, yeah.
They like big body. I think both of them. Hinton, I think there's a chance that both of them could be inside, because they really want that powerful, especially with Saquon. They want that powerful offensive line that bullies people. Obviously they also want an heir apparent to Lane Johnson. He's not going to play forever. So, but I think you have multiple options. They'll move a big guy inside.
Yeah, that's true. Good point with Philly. Yeah.
Rick, how much has NIL changed that? You mentioned that about the love of the game. I heard, I think it was Les Snead. If I'm not, one of the GMs was on Pat McAfee. I'm pretty sure it was Les talking about that's a huge factor in whether they draft guys, especially in the NIL era. 10 years ago, it used to be make it to the league to take care of your family, right? That's what you're like the mouse chasing the cheese. Now you're kind of getting some of that earlier with the NIL deals. How much bigger or more prominent has that become in your evaluation of players leading up to the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think it played a factor into Shedeur Sanders' draft stock, right? I mean,
yeah, we're going to talk about that for sure.
When you walk into your draft room meeting wearing a chain that's worth more than everyone's salary in the room, basically, it could rub people off the wrong way. I think that, I look at a guy like Quinn Ewers, who turned down NIL deals between $4 to $8 million to enter the transfer portal. And he took a chance on himself and went into the 7th round. So he cost himself a lot of money. And I'm going to be curious to see how that factors into Arch Manning's decision next year.
Right.
If Texas, I mean, I heard Texas now is going to be spending between $30 to $40 million on their roster this year.
The Texas schools are insane. They're gonna become the best overall.
So I wonder
money in Texas.
By this time next year, if the Longhorns are able to put together a package that is more worthwhile than the first round pick of the NFL draft, we're getting to that stage now. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah,
but you're right. As far as guys are going to go on day 3, why not? Why not take the money and stay in college?
Yeah. Carson Beck did it.
Yeah, and look what he's making. I mean, if I were Quinn Ewers, I wonder if he's double thinking it now. I went to the 7th round.
I think he's definitely thinking about it. I mean,
definitely. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens there. You mentioned him. I want to talk to you about him, Rick. You were the one guy we had on. Shedeur, you loved him. I was with you. Yeah. I like the player. I liked him coming in, but he falls all the way to the 5th round, man. What do you think of that? What's your initial reaction to Shedeur falling that far?
Well, I still love the talent, but obviously I need to spend 15 minutes behind closed doors with him and we'll have a different opinion. And you're hearing some of the horror stories now that he was very combative in these meetings, spoke down to NFL teams who weren't in the top 10, almost as if like, why am I wasting my time talking to you?
Yeah.
And I think it was just an accumulation of the poor interviews, trying to dictate the draft. Like, nah, I'm good on the Senior Bowl. Why don't you, if you want to come see me, you can come see me at the East-West Shrine Bowl, even though all the GMs go to the Senior Bowl. And then the NFL issued a memo saying, hey, you have to participate in practice if you attend these events. He said, nah, you know what? That rule doesn't apply to me. Kind of hung out with his entourage all week. Opted out of the combine, opted out of the Big 12 Pro Day, had his showcase, not a pro day, he had a showcase.
Showcase.
Right? After all the pro days were pretty much in the books. And the NFL is a corporation and people might not want to hear this, but you have to conform to the corporate mentality.
Well, I even make it simpler than that, right? It's a job. It's a job interview. I mean, who goes into a job interview and belittles the people interview? Now, maybe somebody does, but they're not getting the job.
Yeah.
I mean, we all try to put our best foot forward in those types of situations, most of us. And yeah, I mean, I'm not, Big Rick doesn't need me defending him, but anybody who does this, we don't have access to interview. We don't get to interview the kid. Right. We could just talk about what we see on film, what we think he has from a talent perspective. But if he comes in and says, why am I doing this? I don't belong here. You should be kowtowing to me or whatever. You might say, you know what? I don't want this guy leading my team.
Yeah, especially as a quarterback, right? Because you're hearing too, like on the chalk talk on the whiteboard, if he was questioned, he would push back almost like, bro, like, are you kidding? Like you're questioning me? You're challenging me? Like, I mean, how do you work with that? You know? And what's crazy, couple things is like, one, I heard Sean Payton had a handshake agreement after the draft to bring him in as an undrafted free agent, which would have been interesting. And then also, if you remember, like the Browns jumped up in front of Philadelphia because there was
A
talk
lot of
that
people thought the Eagles were going to take him there.
there was some talk there the Eagles were going to take him.
Yeah.
And the other storyline to keep an eye on too is you hear that the owner there in Cleveland got involved and said to make this pick because if you're a sicko like me and watch the entire draft, they went to the Browns war room. Every pick, they were like giddy. They were like a kid in a sandbox jumping around, high-fiving each other. When they went to the Browns war room for the selection of Shedeur Sand, I mean, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski looked like they were at a funeral.
Yeah.
You know, and I just wonder if this pick got pushed on them. And then you wonder too, like even take Deshaun Watson out of the equation, but like, how do you evaluate 4 quarterbacks, right? Like, how do you get them the necessary reps? Even rookie minicamp, like Dylan Gabriel now is going to be taking snaps ahead of him.
Yeah, and he's got the dude who's got the #1 selling jersey in the NFL right now breathing down his neck. I mean, I thought that was a dumb move by them just to bring in 2 quarterbacks, you know.
Yeah, when owners get involved, yeah,
I think it's clear it came from ownership there. At least it looks like it to me. I have no way to confirm it, obviously, but certainly does look like it. But we'll see what happens with it all, Rick. We appreciate you breaking it down, man. Any other things that stuck out to you in the draft that you feel the need to mention here? Obviously,
who do you like the best? Regardless, we're Eagles centric here, but who do you like the best?
Well, I don't like the Cowboys the best. I like what they did with their first 3 picks. I thought
so do I.
I thought they added like 3 potential starters there. And then I give credit to Baltimore. Like I think Eric DeCosta year in and year out.
They're so smart.
Yeah,
they might not have any morality, but they're smart.
well,
you know, with championships with choir boys.
Yeah, right. And we talked about Malachi Starks at length on this show. For the best safety to fall in their laps and to pair him with Kyle Hamilton. I mean,
I'm not talking about Malachi. I'm talking about Mike Green.
Mike Green.
Best rusher in the draft.
I was going to get there. And so, like, you put that guy on Baltimore's defense, which is incredible. Teddy Buchanan was actually my poor man's Jahad Campbell in this year's draft. So he can do a lot of similar things. And I liked Emory Jones, who they plugged in the 3rd round. I think he's going to be a solid player in this league. So, I thought Atlanta got criticized unfairly for trading up for James Pierce. But I like what they did with, bringing in Walker and Pierce, doubling down. I think Atlanta's going to
bomb it. They've been looking for a pass rusher since John Abraham. They might as well carpet bomb it.
I think Atlanta's going to be a good team this year. So, but I mean, hey, I've been staring at this thing so long, fellas. My eyeballs are bleeding.
And now you got to get the next year. Who's #1 next year? Arch.
He's going to be the leading contender going into the season. I think you could see, we'll see how many quarterbacks do decide to declare. I think will determine how strong this class is. Right. But Lenora Sellers, when I was down at the Senior Bowl, Lenora Sellers out of South Carolina was a name that kept popping up to keep an eye on. Obviously, the kid Nico is going to be a fascinating story now from UCLA. Yeah. And you've got guys like Newsemeyer at LSU who went back to school, Drew Alar who went back to school. We mentioned Carson Beck. So it's going to, I think, be a lot of quarterback heavy into the equation.
Yeah, I wonder how much of them too watch this year and are like, boy, if I am projected round 1, I am not coming out, So we'll see what
those NIL payouts keep going up. I
wonder if the NFL is going to have to do something eventually. I mean, I don't know what they would do, but I don't know. You might have to address that eventually. No, Rick. The other thing that's happening is colleges aren't going to high schools anymore, right? They're going in the transfer portal.
That's right.
They're no longer scouting these guys from sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. They're going right to the portal. Those
you got to recruit guys every year. You got to recruit your own players to stay.
Yeah.
Re-recruiting is the hardest part. And then, like when you're compensating guys now. Coaches are going to lean towards the proven commodity as opposed to a kid out of high school. I don't know exactly what I'm getting.
Right.
I think what's going to be coming, I don't know when the CBA is up. Is it 2030? But I would imagine, the new CBA, these first round deals are going to have to go up just to compete with the college payouts. I don't know. I don't know if the NCAA can legislate this in the court of law because every state has different legislation and they keep losing. So I don't know. I don't know if the NCAA, like, they opened a can of worms that they didn't anticipate. And I don't think they can put a lid on it.
They got to do something. I know the new head is trying to get some antitrust stuff through Congress, so they got to.
I heard a salary cap would be coming where you can compensate, like each position would have a max salary that you can pay. But I mean, you've got to get all these schools on board with that, right?
Yeah, there's got to be some order, though. It's a free for all right now.
Yeah, you got to have a system. You have to. Otherwise, it's just.
I know a lot of people are asking for Nick Saban to kind of step up and become like
the
an
commissioner
commissioner and try to like put this whole thing together, because
I don't think Nick wants to do that. He's enjoying his TV gig.
Right.
He's pretty good at it too, though.
Sometimes that's not a good thing. He's a great football coach, but I don't know if he's a great business guy. You got to figure that's a whole different spectrum.
Well, we saw Isaiah Thomas run the CBA into the ground. We've seen Bill Polian and the XFL, USFL didn't work out so good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. Rick, thanks for joining in, man. We appreciate it. Great job on the draft this year. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, brother?
Yes, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it,
guys.
Serritella here from the NFL Draft Bible. Great job from Ric Serritella here on the show. Good breakdown of the NFL Draft. Good breakdown of the Eagles draft this year. We got a whole hour left to play here on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, what you think of what Rick had to say about the Eagles draft class?
Yeah, I love his thoughts on Drew Kendall, because I got the same thing.
Yeah,
and by no means is he's not going to push Cam Jurgens, but I just think he's a good player, and I think ultimately he's going to be a starting center in this league. Probably not here, but again, when you take good players, they create value. I've said the same thing with Kyle McCord. I think he's got a chance to develop into an NFL starting quarterback, and by that I don't mean top 10.